again, Homewood Patriot fans. Welcome to this episode of Legends of Homewood Football, in which we will discuss our 10th legend, Brandon Thornton. I've been in touch with Brandon, but due to his busy schedule and practically never-ending duties this time of year as a coach and as a father to young children, we were unable to find a good time for an interview. So for this episode, I've brought in Coach David Jones and Coach Doug Gann to help discuss Brandon's years with the team and his impact as a player. As you know, they're both great storytellers, so I think you'll enjoy my interview with them. As we discussed in our previous episode with Parker Gargis, the Patriots won their third state championship in 2000 in a 5-overtime thriller against Benjamin Russell, in a game that still holds the record for the most overtimes in a state championship game in Alabama history. By the way, that game also holds another state record, which is almost unimaginable considering the shootout it became in overtime. But Homewood's defense, led by Coach Dickie Wright and a bevy of all-state defenders like Matt Allison, Chris McCauley, and Antoine Dunn, held Russell to only 3 first downs. 3 first downs, which is the fewest in state championship game history. Our 10th legend, Brandon Thornton, who grew up in Homewood, went to Shades Cahaba, started playing Little League football at age 5, and played at Homewood Middle School, was only a freshman in 2000 and did not play varsity that championship season. However, in 2001, Brandon, who is the nephew of one of Homewood's best players in the early 80s, by the way, Ed Thornton, both of which wore number 48, started for Homewood as a sophomore. He racked up close to 1,200 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns for a sophomore, helping the Patriots to a 10-0 regular season and then cruising through the first 4 rounds of the playoffs, including beating Russellville for the second year in a row in the semifinals. Sadly, however, in the state championship game, a botched quick kick late in the game that, as you know, we discussed with Parker Gargis in the previous episode, doomed the Patriots, allowing Benjamin Russell to avenge their loss in the championship game the year before. The bright spot in that game, however, was Homewood's very first play from scrimmage, when Brandon Thornton went 92 yards for a touchdown, a play which is still the longest TD run in a state championship game history. By the way, he broke a record that was held by Carnell Cadillac Williams of Auburn fame. In 2002, Parker Gargis' senior year, Brandon piled up close to 1,500 yards, with the Patriots having only one blemish on their regular season record, a 17-20 loss at Briarwood. However, because of some offensive adjustments involving Thornton that you'll hear Jones and Gann discuss here in a bit, the Patriots avenged that loss in the semifinals of the playoffs, beating Briarwood 35-25 at their place. In the state championship game the next week, the Patriots again faced Coach Newton's alma mater, Russellville, for the 3rd year in a row, having beaten them in the semifinals in the previous 2 years. The Patriots managed to grab a quick 3-0 lead thanks to a 48-yard field goal by All-State senior kicker Chris Souther on Homewood's first possession of the game. By the way, that's still the longest field goal in state championship game history. Later, a 12-yard TD run by Thornton put Homewood up 10-7 at halftime. From there, the low-scoring defensive fight turned into an offensive slugfest because of some adjustments, again involving Brandon, that Jones and Gann made at halftime, allowing the Patriots to hold on to the ball and to drain the clock. It's a good thing they did, because Russellville's all-state quarterback, Jake Tompkins, who led the state in passing that year and went on to play for UAB, had a big night, going 29 for 37 with 3 touchdowns and 375 passing yards. That 375 passing yards is also still a state record in a championship game. While Brandon did score a TD in the 3rd quarter, putting Homewood up 17-7, the hot Russellville offense scored 2 touchdowns that same quarter, taking a 21-17 lead into the 4th. Early in the 4th, Homewood regained the lead on a Parker Gargis TD run. Then, A huge fourth down stop at midfield by Coach Wright's defense, which was led by All-State linebacker Taylor Barker, gave Homewood a short field to work with, allowing the offense to extend the Patriot lead to 31-21 with 7 minutes to go on Brandon's third TD of the night. Russell and their talented quarterback would not quit, however, cutting the lead to 31-28 with 4 minutes to go. Desperately needing to run out the clock, Homewood's next possession was unfortunately a 3-and-out. So Russell had a chance to win it, getting the ball back with 1:57 to go in the game. The Homewood defense rose to the occasion, however, as sophomore Rodney Shepard had 2 huge sacks to end the threat, as Homewood came out a 31-28 winner, taking their 4th state championship and 2nd in just 3 years. More was soon to come. Brandon was named MVP that night, rushing for 126 yards, 3 touchdowns, and adding in 20 yards on 3 receptions. But now, to better discuss those years, state championship games, and Brandon Thornton, let's bring in the 2 gentlemen that have coached in and been involved in more Homewood games than literally anyone else. Coach David Jones and Coach Doug Gann. Well, look who's back for their encore performances in my Legends of Patriot Football series. Coach Jones and Coach Doug Gann, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Glad to be here.
Well, you guys, we're here to talk about Brandon Thornton. Unfortunately, I couldn't pin him down to an interview, but I would be very remiss if I didn't ask you guys when I had the chance about some other things.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, Doug, after your playing career at UAB, baseball and softball, and by the way, were you the first scholarship quarterback at UAB?
Well, we were not scholarships at that time. It was a Division III. So I was the first and the worst in UAB history. So that's my claim to fame.
How many times have you used that joke, Doug?
Quite a bit, but it's true. So it's not really a joke. It's that. So I got the numbers to prove it.
So anyway, after you graduated there, you started your coaching career at Hoover, correct?
That is correct.
At what point and why did you leave Hoover, working with your dad over there, right? At what point and why did you leave Hoover and come back to Homewood?
Well, I felt like at some point I always wanted to come back to Homewood, and especially at the time I didn't have children yet, but I wanted my kids to hopefully have the experience that I had, going through Homewood City Schools. So when I had a chance to get back, I did, and that's where I stayed.
That's great. So you were home again.
Exactly.
And now, Coach Jones, you have to work with a former quarterback as an assistant coach. How does that work out?
Well, that was no problem at all. The fact that he was was the son of a former coach and everything else, I knew him. And as I told you, I may have told you this before, and I know I've told Doug this, but he was the best quarterback I ever had at the line of scrimmage. He could get you out of a bad play.
See, Doug, I tried to tell you that. Coach Jones, I tried to tell him that. And he humbly begged.
It's hard to tell anything. You can't tell Doug anything. He's hard-headed.
Yeah, I tried to tell him that how smart he was at the line of scrimmage, and he just said, "Nah, it was the system. It was the blah blah blah." But good, you got Jones telling you to your face that, Doug.
Well, it was good coaching. I mean, I was well prepared. They coached me up.
Well, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. The offense changed a lot during the mid-90s. Can both of you, either one of you, talk about when it got revolutionized?
Well, for me, standpoint, when I became the offensive coordinator in '95, Coach Newton just very unselfishly just allowed me to do it all as far as the offensive coordinator. If there was something he specifically didn't like, he would speak up. But 99% of what we did, starting off, our plays were the same thing we'd been doing. But I started installing more formations. I tried to add 2 formations a week that first year, and by the time we got to the playoffs, some of the coaches we were playing against were complaining that it was hard to prepare for us because we had so many formations. And that was the point of it. And then, of course, when 2000 came around, Rich Rodriguez, we spent some time with him in the summer, and that really got us into the spread no huddle up tempo offense.
Doug, how did you feel about the revolutionary changes?
Well, I mean, when I first got there, I guess we went to Clemson in the spring of 2000. And so we
Right.
kind of implemented the like Coach Jones said, the no huddle, shotgun every snap. And I remember, and Coach Jones will remember this, our very first spring practice. I'm not sure we
Whoa.
ran a play. I think every ball snapped over our quarterback's head, literally for 30 minutes. I really don't. I mean, I'm not even. We didn't run many plays. I know that the very first day of spring training doing this, but the next day it got a little better. The next day it got a little better than that, and we ended up winning a state championship the following fall. So but that first day it was a little rough, but we got through it.
Well, anyway, we're here to talk about Brandon, but again, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you guys about his uncle, Ed Thornton. Coach Jones, do you remember Ed?
Oh yeah, I certainly do. I'll tell you this: one of his most naturally strong individuals I've ever been around. We weren't big. Everybody did weight workouts, but we didn't do it near what we do today in the weight room. And I remember that gentleman was strong.
Yeah. Oh, I remember. Yes, this is a true. In that Banks playoff game, my sophomore year, Ed's junior year, I'd been hit a few times, and I was about ready to tap out, and I'm laying there waiting for I guess Palmer Griffin was our trainer to come scoop me up off the field, and I was like the only quarterback we had, and Ed goes, "Doug, you got to play, and I was like, "Ed, I can't move my arm." He goes, "You got to play," and he literally curled me. I mean, picked me up because I was just dead. I was nothing, and he literally just picked me up, curled me up, and said, "You got to go," and I was like, well, if he can do that, because I didn't help him one bit to get off the ground, and I said, well, I guess I'm playing. So anyway, but yeah, he was very strong, good player, great teammate, and like I said, I really enjoyed. I could play basketball there too, and he was a great athlete. He really was.
Yeah, he was somebody that I think we all looked up to as sort of the man when we were in school. But let's talk about Brandon. Look, when you look at the all-time stats for Homewood, Brandon's basically the second coming of Robert Davis. He's number 2 behind Robert Davis on just about everything. And in fact, he leads Robert Davis in average per carry for a career, as
Right.
well as touchdowns. So
Correct.
he actually is ahead of Robert on those two things. Can you talk about the difference between the two of them?
Well, first, it's hard for me to compare them directly because they were in such a different style offense.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the offense changes. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon was a running back, and the only running back we had except for the quarterback. The quarterback is ours in the spread offense and zone reads and option like that, and the RPOs have developed into. The quarterback's got to be able to run too, so that really you have two. But he was the only running back, and therefore he was just very, very. He had more space to operate in. I guess the best say. We were in I formation. There was always a fullback in front of Robert, who sometimes was helping him block, and the rest of the time was just getting in his way as he ran through the line of scrimmage. but Robert, so they had totally different styles of running, but Brandon would have been fine in an I, and I don't know that he would have done everything that Robert did, but then Brandon was a little more capable on the end of receiving and catching balls, and I really couldn't say a whole lot about Robert because we didn't get him out of the backfield hardly ever. In a ball game, he didn't.
That's what I was going to say. Brandon, he was a great running back, but he was also probably our best wide receiver in theory. I mean, we had some packages where we put him out at receiver and put Jarrell Johnson in at running back, and we felt like we wanted to put Brandon with I think it was Freddie Young out there on the outside, and I remember doing that a lot. I think it was against Briarwood in the semifinals. We went to that package there a little bit, and Jarrell was a good little running back for us, hard-nosed player, and but Brandon had great hands, and getting the ball to him in space. I mean, it'd be like, trying to tackle a ghost. I mean, it's hard. It's just hard to hem up. And so we did that some when we felt like we could, take advantage of some situations on the outside. And like I said, he was a great receiver also.
Yeah, because we had lost to Briarwood in the regular season. We came back, and they were just different styles. There wasn't any way to really compare them, unless you want to talk about being competitors, and they both were competitors. They were going to compete.
So his freshman year, Brandon's freshman year, I know he didn't play in the championship game, but that was the 5 overtime game. I broke the game down with Parker Gargis, basically almost play by play. But I just wanted to hear you guys more broadly talk about that 5 overtime game and maybe some of the biggest memories you have of that game. Doug, go ahead, Doug. You go first.
I'll, just the sheer fact, it was what was the regulation score? 10-10, 13-13 or something? I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of points scored in regulation.
Right. It was a defensive slugfest.
Best I remember. And then obviously, neither one could stop either person in the overtime. I think there were a couple of field goals, I think, kicked in the overtime periods.
One of the overtimes you had to match field goals.
But from a 10 yards in, they had some great athletes, and we'd done a great job defensively all night against them, but give them a short field to work with, which is the way the overtime rules work. I mean, it was like we knew we had to score because, it's going to be tough to keep them out of the end zone.
I definitely remember. I know, Doug, you remember too, in the first overtime on third down.
I was going to ask you about that particular play, Coach Jones.
Right, because it says when we threw the ball at the Collins, and we sprinted out. Obviously, it was going to be man because the tight end took the cornerback on the weak side away, and Jake went behind there, and he was so wide open. And I still have a memory of asking you, Doug, at a later date, and saying, what were you thinking when the ball was going to Jake? And it was a softball just coming in, just so smooth. I just kept thinking, please don't drop that football. and Jake was thinking, please don't drop the football. And Doug told me he was thinking the same thing, I believe.
Well, he was definitely wide open, that's for sure.
Well, when I asked Parker about it, he said that when the play call came in, he was asking himself in his own mind, what were you thinking, Coach Jones?
Yeah, there's no doubt, but something was there, and we had to do it, and it worked fine.
Yeah,
and that was the only other thing there, Glenn. I will tell you,
go ahead.
Probably Doug won the game for us because in the first 4 overtimes we stood in the same place on the sideline, and it was always we had to come back and score. He says, and then in the 5th overtime, we had scored a touchdown, and then we're standing in the same place, and Doug says, Coach, you think we can move down there closer to the to the defensive coaches down there, stand down there where they are closer? I said, well, dang, Doug, why didn't you say something earlier? Crap, if that makes a difference, let's get down there. He said, and so we went down there, and I'll be darned if we don't win the game. I got a pass on 4th down, and we win. And so if he'd have done that earlier, we'd have won. We wouldn't have had to do all that stuff.
Well, nobody would have talked about a 1 overtime victory. 5 overtime what people talk about. So I had to make it last a little bit.
Well, yeah. Hey, if you had been standing in the right spot at the end of regulation, maybe we hit that field goal and never have to go to overtime at all.
You never know.
What a memorable game that was. But so now let's talk about Brandon actually getting to play. So he's a starter his sophomore year, the 01 season. You guys are in the middle of a 25-game winning streak. I mean, that just blows my mind to think about going on a 25-game winning streak, for goodness sake. Including getting Benjamin Russell again in the first game of the next season, beating them 18-15. Getting a 1-point win the very next week at Briarwood. But other than that, you beat the crap out of just about everybody. Gardendale, 31-0 shutout. Beat Vestavia 46-22.
I was a very talented group, obviously. I mean, it was one of the bigger teams I remember us ever having at Homewood, just from the standpoint we had some tall, strong, guys with some weight on their bones. I mean, we were a good looking group going out there playing. I remember that. And Coach Jones could is test this, our going against the defense during practice. I mean, that was, we felt like we can move the ball against our defense. Friday night might be okay, and so
Right.
if we did some good
Yes.
things during the week against our guys, we felt like, well, if we can move it against our bunch, then we're gonna have a pretty good opportunity on Friday night to succeed.
And Lord knows you did. So you wind up in the state championship game again. Another matchup with Benjamin Russell, the fifth time in 3 years, for goodness sake. And that was a game where Brandon starts off the game with a 95-yard touchdown run. Do y'all remember that?
I do. I remember
Oh,
that
yeah.
first play of the game. I think it was 90 yards, I believe, or 91. So it may have been
92,
95.
93, somewhere in
It
there.
was something,
Yeah.
but I mean, he went, and if he ever got in the open, you're gonna have a hard time catching him. He could, that's another thing. He can move. He could run, and unfortunately, we didn't do a lot after that.
I
But
know.
from the offensive
That's the crazy
standpoint,
thing. Yeah.
but that one play, that was like, wow, that was exciting. But like I said, we just didn't do enough after that to score enough points for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that game too much because obviously we lost, but there's one game in particular, one play in particular that I have always wanted to ask Coach Jones about. So here's my chance to do it. And Coach Jones, this is a negative thing. And you probably know what I'm about to ask you
I got
about.
plenty of those, no problem.
Yeah, we were ahead 13-10 late in the third quarter. We faced the 3rd and 25 on our own 10-yard line, and you decide to quick kick it. And that got us into a mess. I've always wanted to ask you, Coach, what were you thinking on that quick kick?
Well, if it's well executed, it would have been and we worked on it all the time.
We did
And
work
that,
on it all week.
with and it, we felt comfortable with it. I didn't, I'm not. I suggested that, but of course, Coach Newton had to say, yeah. That he said that's a great yes, do it. And so we did, and unfortunately, yeah, we didn't execute, and that's what we had to do. He says, but maybe if we'd practiced it more than we did or something, I don't know. I felt like it was a good call, and I still do, but the result wasn't very good. So
Yeah,
that
when I
makes it a
asked,
bad play.
yeah, when I asked Parker about it, he said basically what you said. He said, "Look, we practiced it." He took all the blame. He said it's all on me. I got it off the side of my foot. So he said, don't blame any of the coaches or anything like that. He took full responsibility for not executing on it. Well, if it works, to be
Oh,
fair, if it works, I'm sitting here telling you about how brilliant a call it was.
oh yeah, no doubt.
Right? It didn't work, and well, it didn't get executed. Let's put it that way. And it's really what doomed us in that game. So we lose that game, 20-13. But then the next year, his Brandon's junior year, the 02 season, besides a 2017 loss at Briarwood, we whipped everybody by about 3 or 4 touchdowns, right? Including Thompson and Vestavia. So I guess that goes back to what you guys said about, hey, it was tougher going against our own defense, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, and Parker's a senior quarterback in 02. Brandon's played a whole year, at running back for us, and we had a lot of people coming back. A lot of people that played in 2 state championship games. So we felt like we had a chance to have a very good year with the leadership we had and the players we had returning, and and we did. So it was fun.
So, I mentioned you lose to Briarwood, but you got to avenge that game. What do you recall about those 2 Briarwood games?
When we played them in the playoffs, we put, like I said, we put that package in, or that formation, to put Brandon on the outside receiver there. And we didn't show that to him early. I don't think we really showed it much all year till that week. We put it in, especially for them. And because we felt like if we get the ball in his hands on some easy, quick throws, and let him do his thing, we'd have some success. And I do think I don't know how many series we ran that, Coach Jones, but I do know the series we had it, we went down and scored. I remember that for sure.
Right.
On the outside, and I can't remember if we did it 2 or 3 times, or 2 or 3 times with the ball or not, possessions, but it was definitely helped. I think it caught them off guard a little bit. Like I said, it opened up some lanes in there for Jarrell to get some, nice gains running the football.
Yards, yep.
They were so focused on Brandon out there. in the slot, and so
Yeah, well, it definitely worked because you guys managed only 17 points against them in the regular season, but then you put up 35 in that playoff game. So that change in package obviously had some kind of impact on it. But anyway, let's talk about that state championship game. You play in Russellville at Legion Field against Coach Newton's alma mater. Ironically enough, that was quite a roller coaster of a game. So I don't want to get into the back and forth. They score, we score stuff. But just talking general about your memories about that championship game, in particular, Brandon. Coach Jones, you go ahead and start this one.
Okay, well, I remember talking to Doug. We had talked about we needed to be able to run the ball better in the second half than we had in the first. And talking to Doug in the locker room, and we were still a little bit undecided. And we're walking back out underneath the north end zone, and I'm looking at some stats and stuff, and I saw where when we went to split backs and had two backs in the backfield, that we had been more successful running the football, and we'd only done it 5 or 6 times. And I told Doug, I said, "Could you just be? All we've got to do is just go to the split backs more and run out of the split backs, just run the zone out of the split backs." And that's what worked in the second half. It made us able to run the football more effectively, and when we did that, we were able to get into our passing game a little bit better.
Brandon, that game, he had a huge game for us. And like Coach Jones said, when we came off, I think it was halftime, we're walking off the field going to the locker room. And he did say, he goes, I think all we've got to do, and what they ended up doing defensively, they only had like 5 in the box. And we had them outnumbered in the box, and, kept giving it to Brandon, and, Brandon made them pay. And, I think they finally figured it out on like the last drive. Last time we had the football, they actually brought the guy off or brought him back in the box and kind of slowed us down there on the last possession we had it. But up until
Yeah,
then,
we went 3 and out on that
yeah,
possession and gave the ball back to him with 1:57 to go in the game.
and they finally got smart, I guess, and moved a guy back in there to prevent us from running it at will, because we had our way. I mean, Brandon had his way. I think he probably averaged 4, 5, 6 a pop every time we gave it to him. And the good thing is it kept our defense off the field, because, like I said, they were throwing it all over, really quick on us, and making our defense, tiring them out because they were having to play so fast. So it kept, us playing keep away and keeping the ball was pretty huge. In fact, as far as time of possession and that kind of thing, and keeping them off the field. So, it was a, great call by Coach Jones there, and great job of executing by our guys. And like I said, what people don't realize is the very first, I think we may have stopped them on opening drive, and we drove down, had to kick like a 50-yard field goal, and we won by 3 points. And that was a huge, that 50-yard field goal, 49-50 by Chris Souther, that was obviously ended up being the difference in the ball game. And it was the very first time we had the football in the night, and turned out to be the difference. So, yeah, it was Brandon he had to probably be tired and sore after that game, because he ran it quite a few times for us that night.
Yeah, he wound up 126 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 catches for 20 yards in that game. And you talking about trying to keep the ball away from them. Their quarterback went 29 of 37, 3 touchdowns, and 375 yards. And they outgained us 462 to 297.
Yeah.
How in the heck does that happen and we win?
Yep.
Well, I think it helped, like I said, us, being able to run the football. And I don't know how many yards Parker had that night running it, but us being able to play ball control there, and and keep it, because like I said, we were having a hard time stopping them and slowing them down. So I think that was a huge, deal for us to, to keep the ball and be successful running the football for sure.
Right. Aren't they great? We've got more of them coming later. But let's continue the story. So, despite the record-setting play by Russellville's quarterback, the Patriots defeated the Golden Tigers that night for the 3rd year in a row to win the championship in Brandon Thornton's junior season of 2002. In 2003, the Patriots again cruised through the regular season, defeating teams by 2 to 3 touchdowns. The only close calls during the regular season were a 44 to 38 win against Thompson in overtime, and a 10-point win and another classic struggle with Briarwood. Unfortunately, the undefeated regular season was ruined in the finale by Vestavia. But the Patriots won a region championship that year and cruised through the first 3 games of the playoffs. Brandon was in the midst of a season in which he gained close to 2,000 yards and had 33 touchdowns. But sadly, he was injured before that semifinal game at home against, guess who? Briarwood. The game marked the 6th time in 4 years that the two teams had tangled, and the 2nd time in 2 years that they played in the semifinals. At that point, Homewood was 4-1 in these legendary games against the Lions, but without Thornton at full strength, the Patriots were pounded at home 34-7 by a Lions team led by future Alabama and NFL player Simeon Castile. The loss was the last game of Brandon's high school career. Briarwood went on to win the next week in the state championship game over Russellville, 31-7. Despite the Homewood loss, however, it was that game against Briarwood that probably said the most about Brandon Thornton's character and competitive spirit. Let's return to Coach Jones and Gann. I'm glad that you brought up that game his senior year against Briarwood when they lose 34-7. You're telling me it's largely because Thornton was hurt, huh?
Oh, yes, and Coach, I mean, I think Coach Jones and I came with more trick plays that week because like I say Brandon was hurt. He tried to play and did the best he could and went on. Like I said, he ended up, if you're going to talk about this, but he signed with Mississippi State after the season, which was huge, an SEC signee, and weren't very much deserving so for what he had done for us for 3 years and the numbers he put up and the leadership and everything that it was a pleasure to coach. I mean, I don't ever remember having to, I mean, I don't remember anybody ever having to, get on to him to get him to play harder or anything. I mean, he just a go get him type person. I mean, he wanted the ball and, he was going to give it his all. And, he was a great player to coach.
Coach Jones, you want to add to that?
Well, I just say I think his last game, which we lost, was a real testament to the fact that I'm pretty sure there are not many players who would have tried to play in the condition he was in. He really didn't practice all week. I mean, he couldn't run. He was in therapy and then
what was the nature of his injury?
Basically, without trying to be too technical about the whole thing, it was a deep growing pull, and he
for lack of a better way of saying this, you really got to man up to try to play with that injury.
Yeah, and he tried for sure.
Coach Jones, you want to talk a little bit more about his coachability?
Well, just like Doug said, I don't ever remember having to fuss at him about his alignment, lack of effort. Why did you do that? I mean, there's just not anything there. It was just he was always attentive, very coachable. Never, Coach, why do we do that? No, nothing like that. He just, he ranks up there with some other players I had that pretty much they handle themselves and verbally said the same thing. Coach, I don't question anything you try to do. I just think it's my job to try to make it work, and that's what he did.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder if he hadn't got injured his senior year, and we get by Briarwood, if maybe when he got another state championship in there in the mix. Never know.
Who knows?
Well, Briarwood ended up winning it. They won that year.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering. Yeah.
So yeah, it could have very well happened for sure.
Yes, we'll never know for sure, but I really have to believe that had Brandon been healthy in that semifinal game and the Patriots beaten Briarwood, there's a real good chance that Homewood would have won another state championship in 2003, which is all the more remarkable considering what happened in 2004 and 2005, as we will see in our next episodes. But for now, let's talk about Brandon Thornton's neato stats. Of Homewood's 16 10-plus win seasons, Brandon was the starting running back for 3. Brandon was honored 3 times by the Alabama Sports Writers Association in his career. Honorable mention All-State his sophomore year, and then first-team All-State his junior and senior years. Brandon was also honored twice by the Birmingham News as All-Metro. He was selected to play in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star Game in 2003. He was named to the Super 12 list by the Alabama Sports Writers Association in 2003. He was named by the Birmingham News to the Super All-State list also in 2003. As we've seen, he was the MVP in the state championship game in 2002. And as we've also already seen, he still holds the record for the longest touchdown run in state championship history. But let's talk about his season stats. His 1,449 yards in 2002 is still 8th all-time in Homewood history for a season. Then he had 1,951 yards in his senior year, which is 3rd all-time in Homewood history for a season. His 7.3 yards per carry in 2002 is 7th all-time in Homewood history. His 7.8 yards per carry in 2003 is 5th all-time in Homewood history. And his whopping 8.9 yards per carry in 2001 is 2nd all-time in Homewood history. So that's 3 seasons where his average yards per carry are ranked in Homewood's top 10. He's the only player to have 3 seasons in the top 10. His 18 touchdowns in 2001 is 9th all-time in Homewood history for a season. His 27 touchdowns in 2002 is tied for 5th all-time in a Homewood season. And his whopping 33 touchdowns in 2002 is tied with Robert Davis for number 1 all-time touchdowns in a single season. Amazing. But let's talk about his career numbers. His 4,573 yards during his career at Homewood is 2nd all-time in Homewood history, behind, guess who? Robert Davis. His 78 career touchdowns is 1st all-time in Homewood history, however. And his whopping 7.9 yards per carry average for his career is 1st all-time in Homewood history. And then lastly, and most impressively of all, his 524 total points scored is the most in Homewood history. Yes, Brandon Thornton is the leading scorer in Homewood history, not Robert Davis. As Doug mentioned in our interview, despite the injury at the end of the season, Brandon accepted a scholarship offer to Mississippi State, where he played for Sylvester Croom, the first African-American to coach an SEC team. Eventually, Brandon returned to Birmingham, however, ending his career playing for UAB. Thornton's numbers, while at Homewood, show that he was every bit the talent that Robert Davis was, and unlike Davis, he played in 2 state championship games and won 1. So his success begs the question, why doesn't Brandon Thornton's name come up more often? Let's return to the coaches one last time to ponder that.
You just off the cuff, I always think, when you start about stats, at running back, well, nobody's going to beat Davis at anything. Well, Brandon was number 2, but again, for his average career, his career average after that was 7.9 yards per carry. Robert was 7.2. Okay, and then touchdowns career, he had 78. Robert had 75.
Yeah.
So he's the one there, and he was tied for touchdowns in a season with Robert. Robert's senior year, he had 33. Brandon had 33, and then of course total points, he's number 1 scoring.
Well, that sort of brings up the question: why do you think that, considering their numbers are so close? I mean, he's, besides the numbers you gave where he's actually ahead, he's usually right behind Robert Davis and all the other numbers. Why do you think it is that Davis sort of goes down as this almost mythical like character, and Brandon doesn't get as remembered as much? Why? What can you speak to that?
Well,
Why do you think that's the case?
Probably because those people that saw Robert play, Robert got the ball every snap. he just for career carries, Brandon is 2nd, 579. Davis is first, 913.
Yeah, okay, that.
Almost twice as many.
Yeah, I got you.
Robert was the offense
Right.
in his 3 years. He was the guy.
Doug, you want to add to that?
I would say, Brandon had a 5-star receiver out there, and Tim Hawthorne, I guess, might have been his junior and senior year. He was, he was young,
Correct.
but we had some other weapons around Brandon that were very talented. Not that Robert was a one-man show, but I do know he took care of the football quite a bit for him and offensively back in those days, which I don't blame. That was good. They should have done, but we were able to spread it around a little bit more, and due to the fact that that's what we were running the spread, no pun intended, but that was what we were doing. So we had some other guys that could do some things also.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And it's just not fair to try to compare the two. You just got to feel like you're blessed if you ever have one like that in your career in coaching.
Yeah. Right. Yes, Homewood has had many talented running backs, but we've been especially blessed by having two such amazing talents as Davis and Thornton. And again, we have to wonder if Brandon had remained healthy in his senior year, would Homewood have not won another state championship? But let's not end with speculation, and instead with a bit of nostalgia that I like to work in these episodes. We don't have Brandon here for rapid fire questions, so let's just talk about what was hot and trending during his senior year of 2003. The number one song in the country was In the Club by 50 Cent. The number one movies at the box office were Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, the third and the most amazing of those trilogy of movies, as well as Finding Nemo, if you remember that cute little fish movie. The number one TV show in the country was CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, the original, not all of those spinoffs. Domino's Pizza was the most profitable restaurant chain in the country. I used to love Domino's, but am I the only one that thinks that it really stinks now? Maybe it's just me. MySpace was first launched that year, eroding America online as the source of social media. Facebook, by the way, was still a year away. It started in 2004 and was limited to just college students, which cracks me up when I think about the fact that college students now see Facebook as the social media of their grandparents. The top news that year, the U.S. invaded Iraq and toppled its government and killed Saddam Hussein in the ongoing war against terror. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, became the governor of California. And tragically, the space shuttle Columbia was destroyed during a re-entry over Texas, killing 7. In sports, Nick Saban won his first national championship as a coach at LSU. And of course, more importantly, he went on to win 6 more at the University of Alabama. Obviously more important. Homewood, meanwhile, was about to win 2 more state championships, as we're going to see in our next few episodes. So where is Brandon now? Well, as I mentioned earlier, he's a father of 4, with his youngest being 1 year old and his oldest entering his junior year of high school. Brandon lives in Pinson and is an assistant coach at Mountain Brook Junior High. His oldest son lives in Arkansas with his mother and stepfather and is playing defense and running back for Bentonville High School. And if this clip from his sophomore year is an indication, it looks like another Thornton is headed for a college football career. Too bad he's not wearing number 48 for Homewood. Well, that's all I've got for this episode. Look out for a little more of my interview with Jones and Gann as our series on Homewood Legends is about to begin discussing what I feel is the best team in Homewood history. Stay tuned.